Hey guys, Epidemic 2020 here again, and today we'll be back talking about a new topic. This time we're going to go with abortion. So I have cheated a little bit. I have somewhat of a script to go off of, but I'm going to try and get some candid reactions from this one over here. So we'll see how this goes. So abortion, what do you think? Is it good or bad?
I think it's bad.
Bad? Is it always bad?
Depending on the circumstance.
What circumstance would make an abortion okay?
I would think abortion would be okay if a mother's life was in danger.
What about if she's a rape victim, something like that? It would cause intense psychological trauma to her to have her child. Would we still say she can't get an abortion morally? Or would that be a reason she could?
I don't think that's a valid reason to get an abortion.
Alright, so let me try a different question. If I asked you, is it okay to kill another human, what would you say?
Then I would say it's not okay.
Okay, so
right.
The temptation is to just answer the question and say no. But there's a difference between killing for self-defense and killing for fun, right?
Yes.
Is it acceptable to kill for self-defense?
Yes.
Yeah. So the question, can you kill a human, is actually not answerable. It's too broad. Because sometimes you can kill a human and be okay with it, because it's self-defense, that's morally acceptable, and sometimes you can't. I think abortion is something like that, where it has, where circumstances matter. It's too broad of a question to simply say, yes, it's wrong, or yes, it's right. For example, there seems to be a difference between having an abortion to save the mom's life and having an abortion just so you save your bikini body. Or it seems morally different, at least potentially could change the outcome as to whether we're talking about an abortion at 1 month or an abortion at 8 months, or an abortion at 2 days, or an abortion at 8.5 months, something like that. So I think those circumstances are relevant. But perhaps we can draw our attention to this question in particular. One of the questions we come across is, does a fetus have personhood? It's kind of a tricky question. We don't think too much about personhood. A fetus is definitely alive, and a human's alive, but our skin cells are alive, and bacteria is alive, and mosquitoes are alive. And how bad do you feel when you kill a mosquito?
Not bad at all.
Right? Do a little dance.
There's one right there.
So, just because something's alive doesn't mean it's of equal value. Bacteria is just not the same as a human. We don't find those two things equally valuable. What makes a human more valuable than bacteria is personhood. So before we can even really have a conversation about whether a fetus is valuable, we need to figure out what gives us personhood. And there's probably no surprise here, but philosophers greatly disagree about the answer to this question. One philosopher that comes to my mind that has an opinion on this is Immanuel Kant. Remember what Immanuel Kant argues about what makes a person valuable? Put you on the spot here.
Let's see. He says that if you can be your own self-legislator, then a person is valuable.
Yeah, so for him, the ability to make your own decisions or figure out what rules you live by is something he calls reason, the ability to reason. So he thinks human beings are valuable because we have the capacity to reason. If he's right, then it's very hard to look at a fetus as valuable. A fetus doesn't self-legislate. They don't make their own decisions, right? At 1 month, there's no chance of them doing that. But even at like 1 year old, it's hard to think of a baby human as being a self-legislator. So if he's right, that has some interesting implications. But there's more views out there on what constitutes personhood. Do you remember what the utilitarians say about what gives you value?
To a utilitarian, you're more valuable, I guess, or the majority, once the majority, I guess, has happiness, that makes...
Right.
Would make a decision.
Yeah, so utilitarians are about maximizing happiness. And the reason that they want to maximize happiness is because they think pleasure is good and pain is bad. So people are morally valuable because we can experience pain and pleasure. So we have to ask ourselves this: can a fetus experience pain or pleasure? When do you think that the fetus, their nervous system develops? Do you have any idea?
Yes.
You can probably tell what profession she's in because she knows these answers a lot better than I do.
Okay, so we know that the fetus brain begins to develop at week 5. That's when the heart begins to develop, along with the brain stem and the brain. But it does not fully form until week 12. That's when the brain is fully formed.
All right, so it's a tricky question even for a utilitarian then, because before you can experience pain or pleasure, you're not a moral agent, you don't have personhood. So for them, it would make sense that abortion could take place early on, as long as you're not causing pain in society, I suppose. So for them, a being is going to obtain personhood when they can experience pain and pleasure. But they're not the only person that has an idea on this. We're only going to look at a couple more. Christians tend to think that a person is valuable because they have a soul. So when do you think the soul becomes implanted in humans? Any idea?
According to Christianity, I feel like the soul is implanted once the two reproductive cells form a zygote.
Right, so I thought that too back in the day, but really I think that's actually a belief some Christians hold, which has not been held all throughout church history and is found nowhere in the Bible. So there's no verse there that tells us that people get a soul when the two of them meet. The next video we do will be on what the Bible has to say about abortion. And that might say some things that you have not expected if you haven't read the Bible for yourself. But yeah, people claim to know when the soul comes into being, but the Bible just simply doesn't tell us that. So if you're going off of Christianity, you don't actually have a straightforward answer to that question, although a lot of people think that there is. The point I'm getting at here is that we don't know who's right. Is it the utilitarians that are right? Is it Kant that is right? Is it the Christians that are right? Is it some combination? Is everybody a little bit right? Like, what is it that makes a fetus valuable? If we don't know the answer to that question, then we're certainly not going to know for sure whether a fetus has value or to what extent they have value at 1 month and 5 days, right? There's no way we're going to know that answer for sure, certain. And I think our ignorance is actually pretty important about that. Let me get to that point in just a second, though. I want to look at two extremes and try and rule them out. See if we can all, or most of us, can end up in some middle ground together. So the first extreme I can think of is if we assume that the fetus is equally as valuable as the mother. Do you think that's a reasonable position? Say that the life of the mother and the life of the fetus are equivalent.
I don't think so. I don't think you can say. I don't really think you can say that they're both equal.
If you had to pick one, if you could save only one, if they're both in danger, you can save the mother or you can save the fetus. Would it be a toss-up, 50-50?
I don't think it would be. I think for an outsider looking in, I don't think it would be 50-50. I feel like the value of the mother is more, it trumps over the fetus.
I think so too.
However, if you think of it in the mother's perspective, depending, certain people would think that, I mean, if the mother, some mothers would feel like their baby's life is more important.
Right.
That all depends on the person.
Certainly their choice, ultimately. But I mean, if we look at it in terms of personhood, if Kant's right, the mother's a self-legislator, the fetus is not. If the utilitarians are right, the mother can fully experience pain and pleasure, the fetus cannot. We don't know if the fetus for sure has a soul, but we know the woman has a soul. So it seems on almost all these standards of personhood that we can be more certain that the mother is valuable than we can that the fetus is valuable. So if I had to choose, if it was up to me for whatever reason to choose between the two, I feel like I would side with the mother. Well, let's look at the other extreme. We say the fetus has no value, or the fetus has equivalent value to a rock. A rock is obviously not a moral agent. It doesn't have personhood. You can crush them, you can discard them at any time you want. You don't need a reason to do so. So that would mean the fetus has no moral worth. And I don't think anybody really argues that position. So we find ourselves somewhere in the middle here. The fetus is more valuable than a rock, less valuable than the mother. So we have to try and figure out exactly how valuable is the fetus. And I'm not sure we can actually do that. I think we're stuck in a state of ignorance on this issue. But that ignorance actually kind of informs how we're going to respond. So let me give sort of a silly example here. Have you ever heard of this guy called FPS Russia?
Nope.
Okay, well, I didn't really expect it to. Anyway, he makes these videos where he essentially shows off guns and explosives. I'm going to show a video of him real quick, and then we'll talk about it. So obviously, all of us need to shoot a law rocket at a truck from time to time. Would you actually blow up the truck?
I wouldn't. It's my personal property. There's no need for me to blow things up.
Oh, I would totally blow it up.
I could scrap it for money and get some money from scraps, I guess.
Haven't you shot a grenade launcher, though?
I have shot a grenade launcher.
And was it fun?
It was amazing.
I rest my case. Alright, so for the point of this analogy, there's nothing wrong with blowing up the truck as long as nobody's in it, right? But what if we suppose, or I'm unsure whether or not somebody's snuck onto my property and sleeping in that truck. If I'm not sure whether there's a human being in that truck or not, would we still blow it up?
No, you can't take the risk of killing another human.
Right. I wouldn't take the chance. I would hope that other people wouldn't risk blowing up the truck, right? It seems like our ignorance there, especially if you don't let me check. If you don't let me check whether or not the person's in the truck, I'm not going to shoot the rocket. I would need a really good reason to fire that rocket if I was uncertain whether or not there was something alive of great value in that truck.
This would be a great time to yell, "Is there anyone downrange?
Yeah.
Is there anyone downrange?"
Well, for the analogy, you can probably see where I'm going with this. We don't know how valuable a fetus is. We know it's something more valuable than a rock, less valuable than a female, fully grown, the mother. So if you don't know how valuable it is, it seems like you would need a really good reason to risk terminating it. Just like with the truck example, we should err on the side of caution. If you don't know whether there's a person in the truck or not, you don't blow up the truck. So if you don't know how valuable the fetus is, you don't risk killing it. You would need a really good reason to do so. I don't think all reasons that people get abortions are equally equivalent. There's this girl named, I think it's Josie Cunningham. You heard of her before?
Yes. On the news.
Okay, so she was actually popular a while back. She was going to go on Big Brother, but she was pregnant, so she was going to have an abortion. She ultimately didn't end up doing that, but that was her game plan. She was going to have an abortion to appear on Big Brother. That to me seems like not as likely to be an acceptable of a reason to have an abortion as if a person who, for example, a rape victim. Right? A rape is a very psychologically traumatic event, and being pregnant after a rape would remind you all the time of being raped. So that would be a psychologically traumatic event. Avoiding psychological trauma. Avoiding psychological trauma seems to be a whole lot better reason than trying to be on reality TV. So it seems to me that it's much more likely that a rape victim could be morally acceptable for having an abortion than it would be for somebody who just wants to get on television. So not all reasons seem to be morally justifiable, or likely to be morally justifiable. So what do you think about what I've just said?
I'm starting a coughing fit.
Somebody needs some water. Take time. I think you were thinking about coughing the whole time. That's what I was saying.
I was.
So recap.
Really
We
fast.
don't blow up a truck because there might be a person in it.
Right.
We don't know if there's a person in it. If we don't know there's a person in it, we wouldn't blow it up. When it comes to an abortion, we don't know how valuable a fetus is. We know it's of some value. It might be of great value.
Right.
So are we going to risk blowing it up if we're unsure? Shouldn't our ignorance make us err on the side of caution?
I agree. Why take the risk? Why take the risk of destroying something that could possibly, have personhood, if you think of it that way?
So that's not to say all abortion is definitely wrong. It's to say
Is all abortion?
Do you think all abortion is wrong? We already got one instance that we agree on. The life of the mother is acceptable reason to terminate the pregnancy.
Correct.
We need to save the mom.
Right.
the debate we have is essentially of the disagreement you and I have, it seems like, on are there other factors that might be justifiable.
Right.
I think intense psychological trauma would be an acceptable instance.
I don't think that's an acceptable instance. I understand that a mother might have gone through a traumatic experience. However, it doesn't deem it acceptable to kill something, take the risk to kill something that might have personhood. Mm-hmm. That's not an acceptable reason. You know, that I'm sure there's plenty of people who have, or of very valuable individuals now in our society who are born out of rape, and if they had been aborted, they would never be here with us. So, kind of something a mother has to deal with. I mean,
regardless of what we come to conclusions about the right answer being, and I'm not expecting everybody to agree, all we really agree on so far is that the fetus has some value, and that you need a pretty good reason to abort it. Our disagreement here seems to be on what constitutes a good reason. I think avoiding intense psychological trauma would be a good reason. You think it would have to be an even better reason.
Are you taking the side of utilitarianism? So
a little bit. So I argue, as you guys know, I argue against utilitarianism quite often, but I don't think they're entirely wrong. I don't think that pain and pleasure are all that matters, but I do think pain and pleasure matter. So I guess it's somewhat similar to what a utilitarian might conclude. Another thing to think about just before we go. Abortion's a unique issue. It's unique in the sense that it requires a heck of a lot of altruism on the part of the female. Whoever chooses to go through 9 months of pregnancy is undergoing quite a task. So even if it's kind of easy to say, don't abort the fetus, you have to realize that the statement, don't abort the fetus, is actually identical to feed and house the fetus for 9 months. So even if you think that's the right thing to do, recognize how difficult it is to do, how much sacrifice it requires. That might make you a little bit more empathetic and compassionate dealing with people who may have found themselves in a circumstance where they actually do go through with abortion. That being said, I hope you found the video informative. Feel free to leave any comments and disagreements down below. The next video is going to be on a biblical stance on abortion, and I think it may say some things that you might not have been expecting. So stay tuned for that video. I think that's going to be a really interesting one. And as always, test everything, hold on to the good. Test everything, hold on to the good. See you guys later.
Can you even get out my coughing part? Why not?
It's beautiful. No. What? I'm gonna give you a blue mark on your nose.
I was gonna tell you something. Hold on. What was the last one? But what is the 9 months? The 9 months that she has to spend in
pregnancy?
Yeah, compared to the whole life of another human being. I wanted to say that, but I don't want to
say it now. No, I'm still confused. How significant do you think the sacrifice is, that 9 month sacrifice?
Not that much.
Not that much?
No.
You work
it's
out
9 months out of...
You work out like all the time, and can you imagine 9 months of not being able to work out the same, being hormonally crazy all the time, gaining all kinds of weight, your metabolism changing, possibly having a C-section where they literally, all your ab work is just cut away? That's huge.
It's a huge decision. I mean, and it's a huge sacrifice on your body and on your time.
That's what I'm saying.
I know. It's a huge sacrifice, but comparative to what? To another life that could possibly live for 70 years? So you're not going to sacrifice yourself for someone else.